Okay, we're picking up chapter 6 and about verse 35. And this is where Jesus says, I am the bread of life. And this is the first I am statement. There are considered 7 I am statements. These are them. If you want to take a quick look at them, I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. I am the resurrection. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the vine. And when Jesus says this, it evokes the name of God, the name that is Yahweh, which means I am who I am. And it's the story in Exodus 3 when Moses is at the burning bush and he asks God, what is your name? Who should I say sent me? And God says, I am who I am. And that name and that word is Yahweh. A name that was so holy that for much of the Jewish use of that word, they would never say it. They wouldn't say the word Yahweh. They would say Adonai for Lord. And that's usually in our Bible how it's written. We have Lord, 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 Lord all through our Bible. And that's because we still hold that tradition to some degree. And even, the Jewish people today don't say Yahweh. Christians tend to say the word like that. But yeah, it's interesting how the Lord has still in use like that. And one way to tell if it's the name Yahweh, if it's capitalized, if there's 4 capital letters for Lord, then that in the English text that stands for the word Yahweh. If it has like lowercase letters for Lord, then that's the Hebrew word Adonai. So that's how you tell the difference. But when Jesus says I am, it's in Greek. It's written in Greek in this gospel. And I'll just show you this. I show this in my Bible study, but this is the Greek words. And usually in Greek, you don't need to use the pronoun for like I. You just say the verb that has it has the subject put in there, like first person subject of the verb. So they usually just say a me, right? Spanish does this too. Like you don't need to say yo quiero if I want. You just say quiero whatever, right? Quiero Taco Bell, right? You don't have to say yo quiero Taco Bell unless you want to emphasize it. And so then if you really want, you say yo quiero Taco Bell, right? Same thing in Greek. Usually they wouldn't say ego, eimi. Ego or ego is the pronoun I, first person pronoun, first person singular. But when they want extra emphasis on it, they'd say ego, eimi, I am. And so what Jesus does is he says in these I am statements, he says ego, eimi, and then what follows that, like I am good shepherd or I'm the bread of life, right? So that's how that works in John. And so when he does that, what Jesus is saying is that he's going back to that Moses experience of being on fire with God, right? The image in there, especially for Hebrew mystics, is that it's not really a bush that's burning, but it's Moses' whole person, right? You think of the tree of life, and the bush is a symbol for like an individual tree of life as a bush. Moses, God is lit up Moses. He's on fire. He's consumed with God, the experience of God, but he's not really consumed. So that's the way Hebrew mystics usually interpret that story, not as an objective bush that's burning story. So another way to look at that, right? And so what Jesus is bringing is maybe a sense of that, right? He is the I am that Moses experienced in God's presence. And this is the big way to connect these two. So anyway, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never be hungry. He who believes in me will never be thirsty. This is verse 35. And then verse 36, he challenges them again. So he's been challenging them along the way. And he says, I've told you, though, you have seen me, yet you still do not believe. So again, in John, the formula is to see, right? Come and see and believe, right? They give a witness to come and see and believe. That's the way. And Jesus is saying, you're not there yet. You've seen me, but you're not believing. So take the next step. Verse 37, all that the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me, I will never drive away. So this idea that, Jesus is not a judge. He's not here to be a judge. He's here to be the bread of life, to give himself for people, but they need to come to him. They need to believe in him, right? That's the mechanism. That's the framework here. Verse 38, for I have come down from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. So this is part of the sense from chapter 1, the Word was with God, the Word was God, right? Jesus is enfleshed to give life to the world. His whole person and ministry is about doing this sacrificial thing, which is more than just being on the cross, right? Especially in John, the sacrifice is being poured out all the time. Jesus is continuously sacrificing himself for other people and saying, come to me to receive what I have to give you. This is the will of the one who sent me, that I wouldn't lose any of it, and I will not do my own will, right? I will do the will of the Father. Verse 39, and this is the will of the one who sent me, that I shall lose none of all that he has given me, but raise them up at the last day. So again, there's a resurrection delivery here, a lot like chapter 5, right? In chapter 5, Jesus went from healing to the discourse to this kind of threefold resurrection at the end of chapter 4, in the middle of chapter 5. And here he puts that in again, that this is about raising them up, right? Raising them up back to life. And this is the Father's will, right? On the last day. And then he repeats it for emphasis in verse 40. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. So this is repeated for emphasis, right? Raising them up on the last day, giving them life. This is the common theme of John, right? This is why that you need to believe. This is what he came to do, right? We just hear this again and again in different ways. So then in verse 31, the Jews begin to grumble about him because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. The Jews grumbling brings us right back to Exodus again and Numbers, right? The story in Numbers. There's two stories. Exodus 16 is the giving of manna, and the people come out of Egypt through the Red Sea. They celebrate and rejoice, and it's like the next day or next few days, they start to complain about not having any food, and they grumble. That's when God gives them manna. So this is, this grumbling and giving is echoed here in John. Numbers, what is that chapter? Numbers 20, starting with verse 9, is the story of the Israelites at Meribah, where God gives them water from the rock. And the interesting connection of the water story is that when the people say Moses did this for us, and Jesus says it wasn't Moses, right? The story of Meribah is interesting because Moses takes credit for the bringing water from the rock. God, Moses and God talk. The people are grumbling about not having water to drink, and God says, okay, go and, give them water from the rock. Take the staff and strike it. And when Moses does it, he and Aaron are arguing with the people. It's an interesting story. You should read it. They're arguing with the people because the people are, grumbling. And Moses kind of yells at them and says, should we show you, kind of what we can do? Do we need to give you water from this rock? And he strikes the rock and water comes out by the power of the staff. But right after that, God says, Moses, you kind of messed up because you took credit for that. And because of that, this is called Moses' sin. Because of that, you're not going to get to go into the promised land. So, Moses gets to look on the promised land before he dies, but he doesn't get to go in because he took credit he didn't give God credit for the water. Seems a little nitpicky, but that's the way it goes in the Old Testament. But it connects to Jesus saying, it wasn't Moses who did this for you, it was God, right? And that's the same thing about that story from Numbers. So anyway, this is the kind of the end of the first discourse, and then the grumbling kind of leads us into kind of second part of the discourse, and I'll pick that up with the next video. Thanks.